The door you've always wanted to open. Imagine standing before a great door. It is carved with symbols of opportunity, glowing faintly in the light, but it does not open when you push. Behind that door are the connections you crave, the respect you desire, the love, the freedom, the power to shape your world. Most people rattle the handle once, sigh, and walk away. They think, it wasn't meant for me. Some doors simply don't open. But what if I told you that every door has a key, and that persuasion is the key ring you've been missing? Persuasion is not manipulation. It is not trickery. It is the art of harmonizing your desires with the desires of others. It is the language of influence, spoken silently through trust, empathy, timing, and vision. To master persuasion is to carry keys to doors you thought were sealed forever. This audiobook is your journey into that mastery. If you stay with me, by the end, you will not only know how to ask for what you want, you will know how to inspire others to give it joyfully. The journey begins now. Chapter 1. The First Door. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a crowded marketplace. All around you, voices rise and fall like waves crashing against a shore, merchants calling, buyers bargaining, children laughing, footsteps shuffling across the stone. But above the noise, you notice something curious. One voice always seems to rise above the rest. Not louder, not even clearer, simply magnetic. It draws you in like a flame. Draws the moth. You turn your head, and you see nothing extraordinary, just a man speaking to another, or a woman bartering with a stall owner. But the effect is unmistakable. When they speak, people lean closer. When they gesture, people follow. And when they make their request, somehow, impossibly, the world bends toward yes. What is this invisible force? Is it charm? Is it luck? Is it something we're either born with or forever denied? No, it is persuasion, the hidden current that shapes every human interaction. And whether we admit it or not, it is the power that determines how far we travel in life. Pause and think, how many times in your life have you stood at the threshold of something you desperately wanted, only to watch the opportunity slip away because you couldn't quite find the right words, the right approach, the right energy? A job you longed for, a love you hoped to kindle, an idea you knew could change everything, but that no one seemed to hear. We tell ourselves, it wasn't meant to be. But in truth, it wasn't fate that closed the door. It was our inability to turn the handle. Persuasion is the handle. This chapter, this very first step in your journey, is about confronting the truth that many of us spend our lives denying. Persuasion is not optional. It is not a luxury reserved for salespeople, politicians, or performers. It is the thread that runs through every human connection, from the way you ask a friend for help to the way you ask the universe for your destiny. And here is the foundational truth. Persuasion is not about overpowering others, it is about awakening them. Think back to when you were a child. Remember the first time you convinced someone bigger, older, or stronger than you to see things your way. Maybe it was persuading your mother to let you stay up past bedtime, or persuading a friend to share their toy, or persuading your teacher that you deserved another chance. Back then, you didn't know about negotiation tactics. You didn't have a list of strategies. What you had was something deeper, instinct. You felt your way through. You smiled at the right time. You widened your eyes. You said please with a kind of ache in your voice. And it worked. Not because you outsmarted anyone, but because you touched something inside them that wanted to say yes. As we grow older, we lose this instinct. We cover it with armor. Words rehearsed, arguments sharpened, masks worn for protection. And in doing so, we forget what persuasion truly is. Not a weapon, but a bridge. not a trick, but a connection. This is the first door you must walk through on your journey to Persuasion Mastery. The understanding that persuasion is not about taking. It is about aligning. It is the sacred art of finding the place where your desire and another's desire can meet. Consider the way rivers carve valleys. At first glance, you might think it is strength that lets the river shape mountains. But look closer, and you'll see it is not force. It is patience, persistence, the gentle ability to flow into every crack, every opening, until the unmovable is moved. That is persuasion. Not hammering, not demanding, flowing, aligning. If you carry with you the belief that persuasion belongs only to the gifted, the eloquent speakers, the extroverts, the silver-tongued, you will never claim the power that is already yours. Persuasion is not a personality trait, it is a human birthright. Think of the leaders who have shifted history. Not all of them had booming voices or striking charisma. Some spoke softly, almost timidly. Yet their words carried across nations because behind them was truth, conviction, and the ability to touch the hidden chords of human longing. Persuasion does not live in the tongue. It lives in the heart, and it travels outward through presence, intention, and resonance. Let me tell you a story. There was once a farmer who lived in a small village on the edge of a desert. Every year, he struggled to water his crops because the well near his land ran dry by midsummer. He begged his neighbors for water, but they shook their heads. They had their own fields to tend. One day, the farmer changed his approach. Instead of asking for water, he began to speak to his neighbors about their children, how much food the village would have for them in the coming winter. He painted a picture of full bellies and laughter by the fire. Suddenly, his neighbors began to see the water not as something they were losing, but as something they were gaining. The health and joy of their community. And so they shared. The farmer had not manipulated anyone, he had not forced them, he had simply shifted the frame from his own need to their shared desire. That is persuasion. The ability to take what is hidden inside someone, their hopes, their fears, their longing, and illuminate it so that your path and theirs become one. Persuasion, at its core, is the art of recognition. Recognizing the silent currencies people carry within them. Recognition that every human being is not just guarding resources, but guarding dreams. When you learn to see those dreams, when you learn to honor them, you will find that people do not resist you. They welcome you. This is why persuasion is not manipulation. Manipulation is theft. Persuasion is partnership. Manipulation seeks victory for one. Persuasion seeks harmony for both. And here, my friend, lies the threshold of everything to come in this journey. Persuasion begins not with speaking, but with seeing. To persuade, you must first open your eyes, not just to what people say, but to what they hunger for when they are silent. Imagine for a moment if every door in your life could swing open. Imagine the opportunities that seemed locked, suddenly responding to your touch. A mentor says yes, a partner leans in. A stranger becomes an ally. This is not fantasy, this is the promise of persuasion. Not someday, not if you're lucky, but as a skill you can master. But first, you must abandon the myth that it belongs to someone else. Persuasion belongs to you. It always has. This chapter is your awakening, the realization that persuasion is not about speaking perfectly. It is about being perfectly aligned with the unseen truths of others. And so, as we step forward, let us carry this image, the farmer who found water not by begging, but by painting a vision of abundance. He understood the foundation of persuasion, that people give most willingly when they see themselves in the giving. Now that you understand this first door, we must journey deeper. Because recognition alone is not enough. If persuasion is about aligning with desire, then you must learn to see the hidden desires that drive every person you meet. That is where we turn next. Transitional closing. You now stand before the second door. It is locked, not with words, but with hunger. The hunger of the human heart, and if you wish to open it, you must learn to trade in the hidden currency of desire. Chapter 2. The Hidden Currency of Desire. Picture yourself walking through a bustling city street at dusk. Neon signs flicker above storefronts. Music drifts from a cafe. The scent of roasted chestnuts curls through the air. Hundreds of people pass you, strangers in coats and scarves, each one moving quickly, faces unreadable. But look closer. Behind every hurried step, behind every distracted glance at a phone, behind every smile or frown, there is something burning inside. Some carry longing like a heavy stone, unspoken but ever present. Others carry hunger, not for food but for meaning. Some crave recognition, some safety, some freedom, some love. If you could see it, if the invisible could suddenly take form, the air around you would blaze with colors, threads of desire trailing behind each person like glowing ribbons. One shimmering with ambition, another flickering with loneliness, another pulsing with hope. This is the truth that most of us ignore. Every human being is driven by desire and persuasion. The true art of influence is not about what you say, it is about discovering the hidden currency of the other person's heart. Think of it like a marketplace. But instead of coins or paper bills, every individual trades in their own secret form of wealth. For one, it may be respect. For another, it may be certainty. For someone else, adventure. If you do not know what they value, then no matter what you offer, no trade can happen. It's like standing at a stall and offering gold to a merchant who only accepts salt. You hold out treasure, yet they shake their head. You plead, you insist, but nothing moves. Then suddenly, you place a small bag of salt in front of them, and the deal is sealed instantly. This is the mistake most people make when they try to persuade. They assume their own currency matters to everyone else. They speak in the language of their own desire, blind to the fact that the other person is starving for something completely different. The secret is this: people rarely resist because they disagree. They resist because you have not yet spoken in the currency that matters to them. Let me tell you a story. There was once a teacher who wanted her students to study harder. She scolded them, warned them, even bribed them with sweets. But nothing changed. Then, one day, she tried a different approach. She asked her class what they dreamed of becoming. One said a doctor, another, an artist. Another, a traveler who would see the whole world. The teacher listened, and then she said, "Every page you read, every problem you solve, is a stepping stone toward that dream." Suddenly, the students leaned forward. Their eyes lit up. The work no longer felt like a chore, it felt like an investment in their hidden desire. And within weeks, the classroom transformed. That teacher understood something vital. Persuasion begins not with what you want, but with what they long for. If you wish to master persuasion, you must become a seeker of hidden currency. Listen beyond the words. People rarely announce their deepest desires. They hint, they reveal themselves in small ways, in the way their face changes when they talk about family, in the way their tone shifts when they speak of lost opportunities, in the way their eyes brighten when you mention freedom or recognition. Your job is to notice what others overlook. Persuasion is not about adding pressure, it is about releasing pressure. When you show someone that what you are offering aligns with what they already want, resistance dissolves. They no longer feel pushed. They feel understood. Let me share a more personal reflection. Once I met a man who seemed endlessly bitter about his work. He complained about his boss, his schedule, the demands on his time. I asked him why he stayed. He shrugged. "I need the money." But as he spoke, I noticed something in his eyes when he mentioned his daughter. His bitterness softened. His voice warmed. I leaned into that moment and asked about her. He spoke for 20 minutes straight, about her laughter, her drawings, her dream, and then I said, "So it isn't really money you're working for, it's her." He grew quiet. Then he smiled, really smiled. For the first time in our conversation, in that instant, his burden became lighter. His work didn't change, but the meaning did. That's the essence of persuasion. Not pushing, not twisting, seeing deeper, speaking to the hidden currency. If you understand this, you understand why so many attempts at influence fail. Parents yell at children to behave, forgetting that children crave autonomy. Leaders drown their teams in numbers, forgetting that people crave recognition more than statistics. Friends argue with logic, forgetting that the heart does not trade in logic, it trades in belonging, in acceptance, in love. Desire is the current beneath the surface. You can swim against it all your life, exhausting yourself with words and effort, or you can learn to step into the flow and let it carry your request effortlessly. Here is a practice for you. The next time you speak with someone, ask yourself, what do they truly desire in this moment? Not in life, not in some abstract sense. Right now, in this conversation, is it reassurance? Is it to be heard? Is it to feel important? Is it to feel safe? Listen, watch, feel, and when you find it, align yourself with it. Because persuasion is not about changing someone. It is about revealing that you are already standing where they want to go. There's also a spiritual depth to this truth. Every human desire, whether for wealth, power, love, or freedom, points to something even deeper, a longing for wholeness, a longing to feel alive, connected, purposeful. Persuasion at its highest form is not just about transactions, it is about transformation. It is about helping someone touch that deeper current through the bridge you offer. And when you do that, you are no longer persuading for your sake, you are persuading for ours. Imagine, for a moment, that all the people you meet are carrying invisible treasure chests, locked, sealed, heavy. Your task is not to break them open, but to discover the right key, and the key is always the same. What do they value? What do they hunger for? What makes their eyes soften or brighten? Find that and every chest opens willingly. This is the second door in Persuasion Mastery. The recognition that desire is the true currency of every human exchange. Once you see this, you stop wasting time offering gold to the starving and jewels to the lonely. You begin to offer bread to the hungry, safety to the frightened, freedom to the restless, recognition to the overlooked, and suddenly, the world that once seemed resistant begins to respond. Transitional closing. But knowing the hidden currency is not enough. To use it well, you must learn how to create resonance with others, to reflect back their best selves in such a way that they feel irresistibly drawn to you. That is the journey of the next chapter. The mirror. Chapter 3. The mirror effect. Have you ever stood before a mirror in the early morning light? Not just glanced at it, but really looked. In that fragile moment before the day rushes in, the mirror doesn't lie, it doesn't flatter, it simply reflects. You see the tired eyes, the small lines etched by laughter and pain, the quiet dignity of a face that has lived. But imagine, just for a moment, that the mirror did more than reflect. Imagine if it revealed not only your flaws, but also the possibility hidden beneath them. Imagine if instead of showing you only who you are, it showed you who you could be, the strongest, most radiant version of yourself. Wouldn't you lean in closer? Wouldn't you hunger for more? That is the essence of the mirror effect in persuasion. People are drawn, not to those who dominate them, not to those who overwhelm them with words, but to those who reflect their best self back to them. When someone feels seen, deeply seen, a doorway opens inside them. Suddenly, trust flows, connection forms, influence becomes natural. Because the truth is this: people are not persuaded by logic alone, they are persuaded by recognition. Think of a time when you met someone who made you feel, even briefly, like you mattered. Maybe it was a teacher who told you they believed in you. Maybe it was a friend who said, "I see greatness in you even if you don't see it yet." Maybe it was a stranger who looked you in the eyes instead of past you. That moment, however fleeting, likely stayed with you. Because deep down, every human being longs for recognition. And those who can offer that recognition, those who can hold up a mirror that shines back dignity, worth, and potential, become unforgettable. Let me tell you a story. There was once a young man who wanted to join an orchestra. He auditioned, nervous and uncertain, playing his violin with trembling hands. When he finished, he lowered his head, certain he had failed, but the conductor didn't dismiss him. Instead, he looked at the boy and said, "You play with a rawness I haven't heard in years. You remind me of myself when I first held a violin." The young man left that room, not only with acceptance into the orchestra, but with something far more powerful: belief, because the conductor had mirrored back to him not his mistakes, but his fire. That is persuasion at its most sacred form, not convincing someone of your truth, but convincing them of their own. Now let us go deeper. What does it really mean to mirror someone? It is not shallow imitation. It is not copying their words or gestures in some mechanical trick. True mirroring is spiritual. It is the act of aligning with another person's essence, so fully that they feel safe enough to unfold in your presence. Think of a tuning fork. Strike one and the other begins to hum without being touched. This is resonance, the invisible vibration between beings. When you listen deeply, when you hold presence without judgment, when you respond not just to words, but to the spirit behind them, you become that resonant mirror. And when that resonance occurs, persuasion ceases to feel like persuasion. It feels like recognition. It feels like coming home. I remember meeting a woman who carried herself with quiet strength, yet spoke as though she were invisible. She often said, "I'm not really important. I don't have much to offer." But I noticed something: the way others leaned toward her when she told stories, the way her eyes softened when she encouraged someone else. So one day, I told her, "You don't realize it, but people feel safe around you. You carry peace, like a lantern in a dark room." She grew silent. Tears filled her eyes. In that moment, she realized something she had not seen about herself, and everything changed. That's the mirror effect. To reflect back the truth someone has forgotten or never dared to believe. Now you may ask, how does this connect to persuasion? Understand this: people follow those who help them see themselves more clearly. They are drawn to leaders, friends, and partners who amplify their worth, not diminish it. When you become the mirror that reflects someone's hidden brilliance, they want to walk with you. They want to say yes, because saying yes to you feels like saying yes to themselves. This is why the most magnetic persuaders are not the loudest or the cleverest. They are the ones who carry the quiet gift of recognition. They look into people and find gold where others see dust. But be warned, the mirror effect demands authenticity. You cannot fake it. If your reflection is hollow flattery, people will sense it and recoil. Real mirroring comes from real seeing. It comes from setting aside your own agenda long enough to truly enter the world of another. It is not about tricking someone into agreement. It is about helping them recognize that what you offer resonates with who they are becoming. There is also a deeper spiritual truth here. We are all, in a sense, mirrors of one another. Every encounter reflects something back to us, sometimes the beauty we've forgotten, sometimes the wounds we haven't healed. When you step into persuasion as a mirror, you become part of that sacred exchange. You are no longer just asking for what you want, you are helping another remember who they are. And that, my friend, is influence in its highest form. So how can you practice the mirror effect? Start with presence. Put away distraction. Look into the eyes of the person before you. Not just their words, but their silences. Notice what lights them up. Notice what dims them. Then, when you speak, let your words reflect not just what you hear, but what you sense. Reflect back their strength. Acknowledge their courage. Name the beauty they have forgotten. Do this, and you will find that persuasion is no longer a battle. It becomes a dance, a harmony, a resonance of souls. This is the third door on your journey to persuasion mastery, the power to become a mirror that reflects the best in others. When you hold up that mirror with sincerity, resistance melts, because people are not moved by force, they are moved by recognition. And here is the wonder: when you become a mirror for others, you also become a mirror for yourself. You begin to see your own hidden strength reflected back in the eyes of those you've touched. Transitional closing. But recognition alone is not enough. The mirror reveals truth, but truth must be honored carefully. And sometimes the most powerful persuasion lies not in what you say, but in what you withhold. That is where we turn next, into the silence between words. Chapter 4. The silence between words. There are moments in life when silence is louder than thunder. Picture a courtroom. The jury waits. The lawyer finishes their argument, then steps back. For a breathless instant, no one speaks. The air grows thick. The silence stretches, and in that pause, the jurors make their decision not because of what was said, but because of what was left unsaid. Or imagine a hospital room, where a family waits around a bed. Machines beep softly. The doctor enters, pauses, and before uttering a word, everyone already knows the truth. The silence carried it first. We live in a world obsessed with noise, words spilling from televisions, radios, social media feeds, arguments at dinner tables, chatter on the streets. But the deepest persuasion does not live in noise. It lives in the pause, in the breath, in the quiet space between one word and the next. To master persuasion, you must master silence. Most people believe influence is about what you say, but words without silence are like notes without rest. They become noise instead of music. Silence is what gives words their weight. It is the canvas on which language paints meaning. Think of the greatest speakers in history, Martin Luther King Jr., pausing after the words, "I have a dream." Nelson Mandela holding silence before answering a question. A teacher who lets a statement sink before moving on. The silence is not emptiness, it is presence. It allows the heart to absorb, the mind to shift, the soul to awaken. Persuasion is not a flood, it is a tide, and tides are defined as much by their retreat as by their rise. Let me share a story. There was once a negotiator known for winning impossible deals. People assumed he must have been aggressive, endlessly persuasive, armed with arguments. But those who worked with him said the opposite. He was the quietest man in the room. He would ask a single question, then fall silent. The silence stretched until the other person, uncomfortable, began to speak again. And in speaking they revealed their fears, their priorities, their hidden desires. The negotiator simply listened, patiently. And when he finally spoke again, it was with precision, because he had allowed silence to uncover the truth. That man understood what most overlook. Silence is not absence, it is revelation. Here's the secret. Silence is a mirror. In quiet, people project themselves onto the space. They fill it with their doubts, their hopes, their memory. What they reveal in those unguarded moments is often more honest than what they say in rehearsed sentences. This is why persuasion is not about overpowering someone with endless logic. It is about creating space for their own truth to emerge. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is not to speak, but to wait. But to wait. Consider how silence works in relationships. Have you ever argued with someone only to realize later that your words did nothing but your pause did everything? The moment you stopped talking, the other person began to process. The silence gave them room to face themselves or think of love. Some of the most intimate moments in a relationship are not in the exchange of words, but in the shared quiet, the way two people can sit together without speaking, yet feel completely understood. That is persuasion in its purest form, not convincing, not coaxing, but silence also carries spiritual weight. Every tradition honors it. Monks meditate in silence. Indigenous tribes hold silent vigils under the stars. In sacred texts, wisdom is often revealed not in thunderous declarations, but in whispers. Silence is where the eternal speaks, and in persuasion, silence is where the soul listens. But silence is not easy. We fear it. We rush to fill it with chatter, as if quiet means failure. Yet the master persuader leans into silence, not away from it. They understand that silence is not a void to escape. It is a vessel to hold meaning. So how can you use silence? First, ask questions, then wait. Do not rush to rescue the silence. Let the pause stretch until the truth reveals itself. Second, after you make a point, stop. Let your words echo. Do not drown them with more words. Give your listener the dignity of space to feel their impact. Third, notice the silences of others, the sigh between sentences, the hesitation before an answer, the quiet after laughter. These are windows into the heart. Silence is not the absence of persuasion. It is persuasion's sharpest edge. Let me paint you another picture. A father sits with his teenage son, who has made a mistake. The boy expects anger, lectures, punishment. Instead, the father simply sits beside him in silence. At first, the boy squirms, defensive. But then the quiet pierces deeper than any words could. Finally, he speaks. "I'm sorry." The silence said what words never could. It reflected disappointment, yes, but also love. The kind of love that waits for you to face yourself. This is the paradox. Silence is both confrontation and comfort. It demands honesty while offering space for growth. And so as you walk this path toward persuasion mastery, remember, silence is not weakness. It is power restrained. It is presence amplified. When you learn to wield silence, you discover that the loudest voice in the room is not the one filling the air with noise. It is the one strong enough to remain quiet. This is the fourth door, the silence between words. Step through it, and you will see that persuasion is not about adding more. It is about knowing when less becomes everything. Transitional closing. But silence alone cannot carry you forward. Silence builds trust, but trust requires something more. It requires weight. It requires the steady foundation of credibility, so that when you finally do speak, your words do not drift like feathers, but land like stones in still water. That is where we journey next. The weight of credibility. Chapter 5. The weight of credibility. There's a reason some voices cut through the noise of the world like a bell at midnight, while others dissolve into the air like mist. It's not always volume, it's not always cleverness. It's not even how many words they string together. It's weight. Words, without weight, drift away like feathers caught in the wind. But words with credibility, they fall like stones into still water, sending ripples across hearts and minds that last far beyond the moment they were spoken. Let me ask you this. When a child hears advice from a stranger, they might shrug it off, but when the same words come from a parent they deeply respect, those words sink into their soul. What changed? Not the content, the weight. That weight, credibility, is the invisible force that turns ordinary speech into persuasion. Imagine a blacksmith's hammer. In the wrong hands, it's just a piece of iron striking metal, but in the hands of a master, every strike reshapes raw ore into a blade. Credibility is that mastery. It is the unseen strength behind every word you deliver, and credibility cannot be borrowed. It cannot be faked for long. It is forged in the furnace of consistency, truth, and character. Let me share a story. There was once a teacher in a small village. He lived humbly, walked to school every morning, and never raised his voice. The children adored him, but what made him unforgettable was this. Whenever he taught them about honesty, they knew he himself had never cheated a soul. Whenever he spoke of patience, they had seen him wait calmly in long lines at the market. His lessons did not live on the blackboard, they lived in his life. Decades later, when the children had grown old and carried their own burdens, they still quoted his words. Why? Because his words were not floating abstractions. They carried the weight of his credibility. Credibility is not about status or titles. It is about alignment. When your words align with your actions, you create trust, and trust is persuasion's foundation. Without it, your influence collapses like a house built on sand. But let's be honest, credibility is hard to earn and easy to lose. One broken promise, one lie, one betrayal of your own principles, and suddenly the weight evaporates. People may hear you, but they will not follow. Think of the leaders who shook nations, not because they shouted louder, but because they lived the truth of their message. Gandhi in India, Mother Teresa in the streets of Calcutta. They persuaded not through eloquence alone, but through the undeniable force of their credibility. Their lives were their arguments. Their presence was their persuasion. Credibility works in subtle ways too. Imagine you are in a meeting. Two people present the same idea. One has a history of following through, keeping their word, delivering on promises. The other is known for exaggerations and excuses. Which voice do you lean toward? It isn't the idea itself that decides, it's the weight of the person behind it. Now imagine a friend who never fails to show up when you need them. When they say, "Trust me, this will work," something in you relaxes, not because of the sentence itself, but because of the countless invisible threads of trust they've woven into your life. Credibility is a silent currency. You cannot see it, but you can feel it. So how do you build it? First, consistency. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Every time you follow through, your words gain a little more weight. Second, transparency. People trust those who admit their flaws more than those who pretend to be flawless. Vulnerability, when genuine, strengthens credibility. Third, knowledge. Speak only where you have earned the right to speak. When you honor truth above ego, people sense it. And finally, integrity. This is the anchor of credibility. Without integrity, persuasion becomes manipulation. With it, persuasion becomes service. Let's pause here, because credibility isn't just about influencing others, it's about influencing yourself. Think of the promises you've broken to yourself. I'll start tomorrow. This is the last time. Each broken promise weakens your inner credibility. You begin to doubt your own words, your own intentions, and when you doubt yourself, others will sense it too. But when you keep your word to yourself, something remarkable happens. You begin to walk with quiet confidence. You no longer need to shout to be heard, because you trust your own voice. And when you trust your own voice, others naturally trust it too. Let me take you into another story. There was a woman who led a community during a time of crisis. People were hungry, afraid, uncertain. She had no official authority, no wealth, no title, but every day she was the first to arrive to serve, the last to leave. She listened without judgment, gave without expectation, and refused to make promises she could not keep. Over time, her credibility became so strong that when she finally spoke, just a few simple words, "We will make it through this together." Her people believed her, and because they believed, they acted, and because they acted, they survived. Her persuasion was not born of charisma, it was born of credibility. Here is the truth: persuasion without credibility is manipulation. Persuasion with credibility is transformation, and transformation is what the world craves. Not another slick salesperson, not another false promise, but a voice that carries the weight of truth. So ask yourself, what weight do your words carry? Do they drift like smoke, disappearing as soon as they're spoken? Or do they land solid and undeniable, shaping the way others see, think, and feel? Credibility is not glamorous, it is not instant, but it is eternal. It outlasts applause, it outlasts cleverness. It becomes the legacy your words leave behind. And here is the paradox of credibility. The more you chase it for the sake of influence, the less you have. But the more you live it for the sake of truth, the more influence you gain. Transitional closing. This is the fifth door, the weight of credibility. Without it, persuasion collapses. With it, persuasion becomes unshakable. But there is another dimension waiting. Because persuasion is not only about the weight of what you say, it is also about the fire with which you say it. Passion, energy, emotion. These forces breathe life into credibility and turn belief into movement. So let us step forward into Chapter 6, the fire of passion. Chapter 6, the fire of passion. There is a reason fire has fascinated humanity since the beginning of time. It dances, it devours, it warms, it destroys, it creates. Imagine the first human who struck stone against stone, watching sparks leap into dry grass. For a moment, the spark was fragile, almost nothing, but then flame. A force so alive, it could cook food, forge weapons, ward off predators, and signal across the dark. That was the day passion entered our story. Now think of persuasion. Without passion, your words are cold embers. They may carry truth, they may carry weight, but they do not ignite the soul. With passion, even the simplest phrase can set hearts ablaze. You cannot persuade fully without fire. Have you ever heard someone speak with such lifeless monotony that even wisdom sounded hollow? Their facts might have been flawless, their logic impeccable, but you felt nothing. And when you feel nothing, you move nothing. Now contrast that with a time you heard someone speak with fire in their voice. Maybe it was a coach at halftime, sweat dripping down their face as they shouted, "We're not done yet." Maybe it was an activist on the steps of a courthouse, trembling not from fear, but from conviction. Maybe it was a grandmother telling a story of survival, her eyes burning with memory. The fire of passion is not about shouting. It is about presence. It is about the undeniable sense that the speaker is lit from within by something greater than themselves. But let us be clear, passion is not recklessness. Fire must be guided. Uncontrolled, it can burn down the very bridges you seek to build. Controlled, it becomes a hearth, a source of light and warmth. Others gather around. Passion in persuasion is the same. Wild, it overwhelms and alienates. Focused, it inspires and unites. Here's a story. A young lawyer once prepared for a case that seemed impossible to win. His notes were meticulous, his evidence strong, his logic flawless. Yet as he rehearsed before his mentor, the older man shook his head. "Your argument is sound," the mentor said, "but it will not move them." Asked the lawyer, "Because you don't believe it enough to bleed for it." The lawyer was stunned. He thought persuasion was about facts, not blood. But in the courtroom, he saw the truth. The jury did not lean in when he cited statistics. They leaned in when his voice cracked, when his convictions spilled out of him like fire. Logic showed them the path, passion carried them down it. Passion is contagious. You cannot light a fire in others without carrying flame yourself. Think of great leaders, not as marble statues, but as living flames. They did not just speak of justice, freedom, dignity. They burned with it. That heat spread until it became a wildfire no army could extinguish. This is why persuasion without passion dies in the air. People are not moved by facts alone. They are moved by the way those facts are delivered, by the trembling sincerity, the unshakable conviction, the fire in the eyes of the one speaking. But passion cannot be fake. We all know when someone is performing, when their fire is painted on like stage makeup. True passion is not volume. It is alignment. It is when your voice rises because your heart refuses to stay quiet. So ask yourself, what ignites you? What cause, what belief, what vision sets your blood racing? Until you connect your persuasion to your passion, your influence will remain lukewarm. Here's the paradox. Passion is both deeply personal and universally. When you speak of something you truly love, whether it's art, justice, faith, or your child, others feel it. They may not share your exact story, but they recognize the fire. Fire speaks a language older than words. Let us ground this in daily life. Think of a teacher. Two stand before a class. One recites facts from a textbook with dutiful precision. The other tells stories, eyes alight, voice rising and falling like a song. Which one do students remember 10 years later? Or think of a friend recommending a restaurant. One says, "It's good." The other leans forward, eyes wide, and says, "You have not lived until you've tried this meal. It's heaven on a plate." Whose recommendation makes you hungry? Passion is the seasoning of persuasion. Without it, the meal may be nourishing, but bland. With it, the same meal becomes unforgettable. Now, passion is not always loud. Sometimes passion whispers, sometimes it weeps. Sometimes it shows itself in the trembling hand of someone confessing their truth. The fire of passion is not measured by decibels, it is measured by sincerity. So how do you cultivate it? First, connect to your why. Before persuading anyone, ask yourself, why does this matter to me? Passion grows in the soil of purpose. Second, embody your message. Passion lives not only in words, but in tone, gesture, and energy. Your body becomes a flame others can feel. Third, allow vulnerability. Fire is raw. Do not polish your passion until it becomes sterile. Let it flicker, let it crack, let it roar. People trust imperfect passion more than perfect performance. And finally, protect your fire. Passion burns out if you scatter it everywhere without care. Feed it with rest, reflection, and alignment, so that when you do ignite, the flame is real. Here is the truth. Credibility gives your words weight. Passion gives them wings. One makes them land, the other makes them soar. To persuade is to walk with both gravity and fire, stone and flame, earth and spirit. One without the other is incomplete. So I ask you, what fire do you carry? What truth burns in you so fiercely that silence feels impossible? Because until you find it, persuasion will remain technical. But once you find it, persuasion becomes transcendent. Transitional closing. This is the sixth door. The fire of passion. Without it, persuasion is a skeleton. With it, persuasion is alive, but passion alone is not enough. Fire can draw people near, but to keep them, to truly transform them, you must learn another art, the rhythm of timing. Knowing when to strike, when to pause, when to reveal, when to hold back, and so we walk forward into Chapter 7, the rhythm of timing. Chapter 7, the rhythm of timing. Have you ever watched a master drummer? Their hands hover above the drum skin, not striking immediately, but waiting, feeling the pulse of silence. and then at just the right instant, their hand falls. The sound explodes, not because of the note itself, but because of when it arrived. Persuasion is no different. Timing is its rhythm. Words, delivered too soon, fall flat. Delivered too late, they lose their force. But at the right moment, even a single phrase can move mountains. Imagine a soldier returning home after years of war. He steps into his family's doorway, tired, wounded, unsure if he belongs anymore. His young daughter looks up at him, wide-eyed, silent. Then with trembling lips, she whispers one word, "Daddy." At that moment, no speech, no sermon, no lecture could equal the persuasion of that single word. Why? Because it arrived at the perfect moment. Timing is persuasion's secret ally. You can have truth, credibility, and passion, but without rhythm, your influence stumbles. Persuasion is not just what you say, but when you say it. Let me take you into a story. There was once a king's advisor, known for his wisdom. The king often grew impatient, eager to act, eager to conquer. One day, the king asked, "Should we march to war?" The advisor said nothing. The silence stretched until the king, frustrated, demanded, "Why will you not answer me?" Finally, the advisor replied, "Because the fruit is not ripe. If you pluck it now, it will be bitter. Wait until the season turns, and it will fall into your hands." The king, though restless, listened. Months later, his enemies crumbled without a fight. Timing won what armies could not. Persuasion is not force, it is rhythm. It is sensing the ripeness of the moment. Think of comedy. The same joke told with poor timing is awkward, painful. Told with perfect timing, it shatters the room with laughter. Or, think of love. The words "I love you" mean little if spoken too soon or too carelessly, but whispered in the exact moment when two hearts meet, those words carve themselves into eternity. Life itself is a rhythm. The sun rises, the tides turn, the seasons change. Persuasion must honor this rhythm, or it loses its power. Here's the paradox. Most people try to rush persuasion. They hammer their points, interrupt, fill the air with noise, but the master persuader waits. They sense the unspoken beat of the conversation. They hold back until the exact moment arrives, and then they strike, not with force, but with precision. Like a surfer waiting for the wave, they do not create the rhythm, they ride it. You felt this in your own life. Think of a time you gave advice to a friend. If they weren't ready to hear it, your words bounced off. But months later, when their heart cracked open, they came back and said, "Now I understand." The words hadn't changed. The timing had. This is why persuasion is not about control. It is about attunement. You must listen deeper than words. You must sense the pauses, the hesitations, the subtle shifts in energy that signal now is the moment. But timing is not only about waiting. Sometimes it is about seizing. History is filled with moments when hesitation killed opportunity. The leader who waited too long to act. The lover who never spoke their heart. The reformer who missed their chance to stand. Timing is a knife edge. You can fall on either side. The question is not just, should I speak? The question is the world ready to hear me? There was once a young activist who carried a vision for change. At first, no one listened. She spoke and was ignored. She marched and was mocked. But she kept listening, not just to herself, but to the world. And then one day, the world cracked open. A tragedy shook the nation. And suddenly, hearts were listening. At that moment, her words spread like wildfire. Her truth had always been the same. But timing turned it from a whisper into a movement. So how do you master timing? First, practice presence. You cannot sense rhythm if you are lost in your own noise. Slow down. Breathe. Listen. Notice the unspoken music of the room. Second, trust patience. Persuasion often fails not because the message is wrong, but because the messenger rushed. Wait until the fruit is ripe. Third, act decisively. When the moment comes, do not hesitate. Strike while the iron glows. not when it cools. And finally, honor the season of the soul. People, like trees, bloom in their own time. Do not force spring in winter. Meet them where they are, and your words will find their soil. Timing is not a trick. It is not manipulation. It is respect. Respect for the rhythms of life, the seasons of others, the unfolding of truth. When you honor rhythm, your persuasion feels less like pressure and more like destiny. Let me give you one last image. A master archer stands, bow drawn, arrow aimed. The target is in sight, but they do not release immediately. They wait. They feel the wind shift, the heartbeat steady, the world align. Then release. The arrow flies true, not because of its sharpness alone, but because it was loosed at the perfect instant. That is timing, and that is persuasion. But rhythm alone is not the end. There is something beyond timing, beyond silence, beyond passion. For persuasion is not only about leading others, it is about connection, a deep, invisible thread that binds you to the heart of another, where words fade and presence remain. And so, we journey next into Chapter 8, The Bridge of Connection. Chapter 8, The Bridge of Connection. Picture this. Two strangers sit across from one another at a table. Neither speaks. No gestures, no explanations, no rehearsed lines. And yet, something invisible passes between them. An energy, a current, a recognition. Their eyes lock. And in that silent exchange, more is said than 1,000 speeches could hold. That, right there, is the essence of persuasion at its highest form, connection. You see, words are only scaffolding. They are the visible structure. But beneath them lies something deeper, something that carries the true weight of influence, the bridge. A bridge not of logic, not of argument, but of soul. Persuasion without connection is noise, but persuasion with connection, it becomes music. Let me tell you a story. There was once a wandering teacher who never owned a podium, never held a title, never published a book, yet people traveled days, even weeks, just to hear him. Why? Not because his words were extraordinary. They were often simple, plain, direct. No, it was the way he made people feel. When he looked at someone, it was as if he saw not their mask, but their essence. People left his presence not only believing him, they left believing themselves. That is connection. Now, pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you truly felt seen? Not for what you do, not for the role you play, not for the face you wear in public, but for who you are at your core. Think of how rare that is, and how powerful. That is the hunger every human carries, to be seen, to be known, to be felt. And persuasion, the kind that doesn't manipulate, the kind that doesn't pressure, is the art of meeting that hunger. The truth is, people don't remember every word you speak. They remember the way your presence touched them. They remember how safe, how understood, how alive they felt with you. Connection is not built by clever phrasing. It is built by resonance, by presence, by the courage to open yourself enough that others can open too. Let me bring this closer. Imagine you are walking across a narrow wooden bridge suspended over a canyon. It sways with the wind. You take one step, then another, heart pounding. But halfway across, you feel a second hand gripping yours, steady, firm, certain. In that moment, you realize you are not alone. That is what true connection in persuasion feels like. It is the steady hand across the swaying bridge of uncertainty. It is the unspoken promise, I am with you. So how do we build this bridge? First, with attention, real attention, not the shallow glance of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but the deep, attentive silence that says, I am here. I see you. Connection cannot survive in the fog of performance. When you strip away pretense, when you speak not to impress but to express, you invite the other to do the same. Third, with empathy, true persuasion does not drag others across the bridge, it walks beside them. It listens for their fears, their doubts, their longings, and it meets them with compassion. And fourth, with vulnerability. The strongest bridge is not built from polished steel, but from living wood. Show your cracks, show your humanity. When you dare to be real, you permission for others to be real too. Let me share another story. A leader once stood before a weary crowd. They expected the usual speech, strong words, big promises, a mask of perfection. Instead, the leader paused, took a breath, and said, "I don't have all the answers. I feel your pain. I've felt it myself." The crowd fell silent, and in that silence, something shifted. For the first time, they weren't listening to a distant figure, they were listening to one of their own. That night, persuasion was not about authority. It was about connection. Here is the paradox. We are wired to persuade, but persuasion only works when we stop trying to convince and start trying to connect. When you meet another human being not as an obstacle to overcome, but as a soul to honor, persuasion takes care of itself. Because connection is persuasion. Connection is the bridge that makes every idea walkable. Think of music again. When a violin string vibrates, another nearby string begins to vibrate too, without being touched. Scientists call this resonance. Souls are no different. When you live in authenticity, when your words and heart are aligned, you resonate. Others feel it. They may not know why, but they lean closer. They listen. They follow. That is not manipulation. That is harmony. So here's the challenge for you. When you speak to others, don't just ask, "What do I want to say?" Ask instead, "What bridge am I building?" Are your words reaching across to their fears, their hopes, their hidden wounds, or are they bouncing off, never crossing the canyon between you? The bridge is not built by force, it is built by presence, and presence is a rare and holy thing in a world that rushes, scrolls, and interrupts. If persuasion is the architecture of influence, then connection is its foundation, and without a foundation, every tower crumbles. Remember this, every human heart is a locked door. Logic alone cannot open it, power alone cannot open it, but presence, the gentle knock of connection, can. And when that door opens, persuasion is no longer a battle. It is an invitation. Transitional closing. This is the 8th revelation. Persuasion is not about conquering minds, but crossing hearts. Without connection, persuasion collapses. With connection, it becomes unstoppable. But connection, it becomes unstoppable. But connection itself is not the final key, something that transcends presence and bridges, because beyond connection lies transformation. The moment when persuasion doesn't just change what people think, but who they become. And that, my friend, is where we must now journey. In Chapter 9, we step into the fire of transformation, the space where persuasion becomes alchemy. Chapter 9, the fire of transformation. Imagine standing before a great bonfire. The flames rise high into the night, their heat brushing against your skin, their roar filling the silence. Sparks leap skyward like stars breaking free from gravity. You feel it in your chest, don't you? That living fire, alive with motion, alive with hunger. Now imagine that fire inside you. Not a metaphorical flicker, not a small candle that can be snuffed out by doubt, but a real raging fire that consumes everything false and leaves only truth behind. This, my friend, is what persuasion is meant to do. Not just change what someone thinks, but ignite who they are. Up until now, we've spoken of trust, of presence, of connection. All of these are essential. They are the wood, the spark, the oxygen. But transformation is when persuasion catches fire. And fire, once lit, is not easily forgotten. Think back to a moment when your life changed forever. Maybe it was a single conversation, a sentence someone spoke that pierced straight into your heart. Maybe it was the look in a mentor's eyes when they said, "I believe in you." Or maybe it was someone challenging you, refusing to let you stay small when you were meant to grow large. Those moments didn't just persuade you, they transformed you. You walked away different, your old skin shedding like ash, something new awakening inside. That is the fire of transformation. One day, his apprentice dropped a piece of iron fresh from the forge. The blacksmith, furious, raised his hammer to strike, not the iron but the boy. But then the boy said softly, "Master, I've seen you shape steel. Why can you not shape yourself?" The hammer froze in the air. The words struck harder than any blow could. That day, the blacksmith didn't just put down his hammer, he put down his rage. That boy didn't persuade his master to change a single action. He transformed his entire way of being. True persuasion always aims at transformation. It is not about winning the argument. It is not about temporary compliance. It is about awakening something deeper. It is about calling forth the person they were always meant to be. And this requires fire. Fire is dangerous. It consumes. It doesn't politely knock, it roars through walls. But fire is also sacred. Every ancient culture knew this. Fire gives warmth, gives light, gives life. Without it we freeze in the dark, and so it is with persuasion. To ignite transformation in someone else, you must be willing to spark a fire that may unsettle them, may challenge them, may even scare them. For no one is transformed in comfort. We are transformed in the fire. But here's the truth many shy away from. You cannot give fire if you don't carry it. If your words are cold, they cannot kindle. If your soul is dampened by fear, your spark will fizzle. The fire of transformation begins not in others, but in you. Do you burn with conviction? Do you stand inside your truth so fully that others cannot help but feel its heat? Because people don't follow lukewarm voices, they follow those who burn. I once met a teacher who said, "My job is not to fill buckets. My job is to light fires." Think about that. Filling a bucket is persuasion at its lowest form. It pours in information, it convinces for a moment. But lighting a fire, that is persuasion at its highest form. A fire spreads, grows and sustains itself long after the match is gone. When you persuade through fire, you don't just win agreement, you awaken destiny. Now, how do we do this? First, by daring to speak truth that matters. Too often, persuasion gets wasted on trivial things. A preference, an ego-driven need, a shallow gain. But the fire of transformation requires that your persuasion reach into what is real, what is essential. When you speak to someone's higher self, when you call out their courage, their wisdom, their buried strength, you're not persuading them to do a task, you're persuading them to rise. Second, by using challenge. Fire doesn't only comfort, it refines. To persuade toward transformation, you must sometimes confront, not with cruelty, but with fierce love. Transformation comes when someone realizes they are capable of more, and you dared to tell them so. Third, by embodying the very change you wish to inspire. A flame does not preach, it burns. In the same way, your life must be the living argument. Your integrity must carry more weight than your eloquence. Let's return to the fire. When metal enters the forge, it resists at first. It is stiff, unyielding. But as it meets the flame, it softens, it glows, and in the blacksmith's hands it takes a new shape, stronger, sharper, more purposeful than before. People are no different. They enter conversations with defenses, doubts, armor, but when they encounter fire, authentic, burning fire, they soften, they glow, and in that moment, they are open to becoming something new. That is the sacred responsibility of persuasion, to hold the fire, to wield it not for destruction, but for creation. But let us not forget, fire must be respected. Wielded carelessly, it burns. Used manipulatively, it scars. That is why only those who have faced their own fire can guide others through theirs. So I ask you, what fire have you walked through? What flames have shaped you, refined you, transformed you? Those are not your scars alone. They are your credentials. They are the proof that your persuasion is not theory. It is lived experience. And when you speak from that place, from the ashes you've survived, others will feel the heat of your authenticity. They will trust it. They will let it touch them. The fire of transformation is not about making others more like you. It is about making others more like themselves. It is the art of seeing their potential and setting it ablaze until they see it too. And when they do, something irreversible happens. They are not convinced for a moment. They are changed for a lifetime. Transitional closing. So here we stand beside the flames of transformation. Persuasion at its highest is not manipulation, not control, not even influence. It is ignition. It is the fire that awakens the dormant, that purifies the false, that shapes the true. But this journey is not yet complete, for there is one final step beyond transformation. After the fire comes the dawn, the legacy we leave behind, the ripples that persuasion carries through time, long after our voice is gone. And that is where we must go next. Chapter 10, The Legacy of Influence. Chapter 10, The Legacy of Influence. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You are standing at the edge of a great ocean. The waves rise and fall with timeless rhythm, each one reaching the shore, dissolving into the sand, then retreating into the vastness of the sea. You watch, mesmerized, because you realize something profound. Long after you are gone, this ocean will remain. The waves will keep moving. The tide will keep breathing. And you, your choices, your words, your influence will become one more ripple in its eternal motion. This is legacy. Legacy is the echo of persuasion. It is the lingering warmth of the fire long after the flames have died down. It is the bridge you built that others continue to cross, even when your footprints have vanished from the path. We often think of persuasion as immediate, the yes in the room, the nod of agreement, the shift in behavior. But the truest persuasion stretches beyond the moment. It is not about winning this day, it is about shaping tomorrow, because the most powerful persuasion does not just change decisions, it changes destinies. Think of those who have left a mark on you. Maybe it was a parent whose words still echo in your mind. Maybe a teacher who awakened a courage you didn't know you carried. Maybe a stranger whose kindness struck you so deeply you never forgot it. They may not even know the impact they had, but you carry it, and through you their influence lives on. That is the legacy of persuasion. There was once a gardener who spent his life planting seeds. He never lived to see most of them bloom. Children laughed at him, saying, "Why do you keep planting when you'll never sit in the shade of these trees?" But the gardener smiled and replied, "Because one day someone will." And indeed, decades later, travelers walked through a forest that he had planted, finding rest, shelter, and beauty. They never knew his name, but they lived in his legacy. That is persuasion at its highest form, planting seeds of truth, hope, and courage, even if you never see them bloom. But here's the challenge. In a world obsessed with instant results, How many of us have the patience to plant for a future we may never witness? True persuasion requires that patience. True influence requires vision. You are not here simply to move people toward your desires. You are here to awaken something that will outlast you. And every word you speak, every choice you make, every hand you extend across the bridge of connection adds to your legacy. Think of persuasion like light. A candle can brighten a room for a moment, but if you use your flame to light another candle, and that candle lights another, you create a chain of fire that no darkness can contain. Your single flame becomes 1,000 flames, carried far beyond your reach. This is legacy. This is why persuasion matters. But let me be clear, legacy is not about fame. It is not about monuments or headlines. Legacy is about resonance. It is the invisible current of influence that flows through lives, often unnoticed, but never forgotten. A kind word can outlive a lifetime. A moment of courage can ripple through generations. A seed of truth, planted today, may blossom a century from now. So ask yourself, what legacy are you leaving in every interaction? When you persuade, are you pushing for short-term victory, or are you building something that will endure? Because persuasion built on ego dies quickly. But persuasion built on love, on vision, on truth, becomes immortal. Here's another story. A young warrior once asked his mentor, "How can I make my name remembered forever?" The mentor replied, "Do not focus on your name, focus on your impact. Names fade, stories fade, but the transformation you spark in others will echo long after even the memory of you is gone." And isn't that the truest form of persuasion? Not to be remembered, but to ensure what you stood for continues to live. In your life you will persuade many. Some will forget your words, some will forget your face, but they will never forget how you shifted their path. They will never forget the fire you helped ignite within them. That fire becomes your legacy. Legacy persuasion requires one final ingredient: intention. Influence without intention can mislead, even harm. But when you persuade with the clear intention to uplift, to expand, to serve, you leave behind something sacred. Your words become more than persuasion, they become blessing. So let us return to that ocean. You are standing at its edge, watching the waves. Now imagine tossing a single stone into the water. You see the ripples expanding outward, circle after circle, further and further. They don't stop where your eyes stop seeing them. They continue, reaching places you will never know. Every word you speak, every act of persuasion, every moment of connection is that stone. The ripples go on, and long after you are gone, they still touch the shorelines of lives you'll never meet. That is the sacred power of legacy. Now let us bring it all together. Persuasion is not trickery. It is not manipulation. It is the art of awakening trust, weaving presence, building bridges, igniting transformation, and planting legacy. It is the ability to call forth the best in others, to leave behind ripples of truth, courage, and hope. You are not here simply to persuade for today. You are here to create waves that will outlive you. You are here to light fires that will keep burning long after your own flame has gone out. Closing words. And so, dear listener, as this journey draws to its close, remember this: persuasion is not about getting what you want from anyone. It is about giving what you carry to everyone. It is about leaving behind a legacy of influence that whispers through time. Because I spoke, because I acted, because I cared, the world was changed, even if only in one soul. That is Persuasion Mastery. That is your legacy. Now the story belongs to you. What ripples will you create? What fires will you light? What legacy will you leave behind? The final chapter of Persuasion has not been written by me. It will be written by you.